Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to this episode of Unpacking the Backpack. Not that it really matters, but I am recording well in advance of when this episode will go live. Well, at least well in advance for me, so that I can try to get a little vacation in, which does not happen much in my world. So, going to talk today about how we can avoid the idea voodoo trap. Are you intrigued? I hope you are. Because it's so important that when we develop ideas, we don't fall victim to idea voodoo. So, here's what I mean. You know, ideas, they are a dime a dozen. Everyone has them. Some are good and extremely creative, while others are not realistic or applicable to a certain situation. You know, as social media continues to evolve and as artificial intelligence is at our disposal, there now seems to be an endless sea of ideas as to how education should change and what educators should do to improve professional practice. It's not just there's ideas. You know, with AI prompts, we can determine, or query potential, not just ideas, but strategies to implement them. So I will go as far to say that just having an idea is not good enough. Just going in AI and asking it for ideas, not good enough. It doesn't take much effort to develop a soundbite that sounds great in theory, but if it is challenging to implement in practice, especially at scale, then we need to reconsider the relevancy of that idea. You know, we all struggle with a tug of war of sorts when it comes to ideas. In many situations, we're asked to either implement or embrace the ideas of others. Ooh, not good. Particularly those who are, accountable to or so-called experts in the field. You know, there's nothing more frustrating when people say, hey, go do this idea. And it's from someone that is leading with a top down mentality, or someone that's written tons of books or given lots of TED Talks is saying, hey, go do this. So that sometimes is frustrating. This can be problematic at times if the groundwork explaining the what, why, when, and how has not been clearly articulated. It's also a struggle if it is missing needed context. Then there are those ideas that we develop on our own. Throughout my career, and even up to this point, ideas are constantly flowing through my mind. There tends to be a bias towards the ones that we come up with, which throws another wrench into the process of moving an idea into actionable change. You know, as we think about being open to new ideas, it is so important in these disruptive times. Things are changing. Things are changing fast. If we continue to do what we've always done, we'll continue to get what we've always gotten. So if we continue to employ the same type of thinking, then the chances are we will probably have to settle for those same old results or worse. Great ideas are the seeds of change. Many of them don't have the opportunity to germinate because of our fixed mindsets. And that was me pulling on my knowledge as a former biology teacher, by the way. I digress. For the most part, nobody likes change. This is how our brains are wired. Unfortunately, for many of us, I can tell you that this was definitely the case for me early in my administrative career. And I will tell you, it is important not to fall victim to idea voodoo. Ooh. So what is that? Idea voodoo is the insidious belief that a powerful, innovative idea is sufficient on its own to manifest change. It's a form of organizational or system superstition, treating a concept not as a starting point for hard work, but as a magical incantation that should effortlessly reshape reality. This mindset is one of the most significant yet subtle inhibitors of genuine progress because it fundamentally misunderstands that change is not a revelation, but a process. It conveniently divorces the glamour of the eureka moment from the grueling, unglamorous labor of execution. As districts and schools, are captured by idea, those that are captured by idea voodoo, will celebrate the brainstorming session, but fail to allocate the resources, create the plans, or assign the accountability necessary to bring the vision to life. Another aspect of idea voodoo is, the things that start creeping into our heads that tell us that this won't work. It'll never fly. It's too polarizing. It's not in our budget, too risky, out of scope. Yeah, but, or we put all these focus groups together and it doesn't work. So the primary way idea voodoo inhibits change is by fostering passivity. The proponent of the idea, believing in its inherent power, presents it and then waits for it to be adopted, as if the concept itself will persuade dissenters, will find budget, and write its own implementation strategy. When the idea inevitably falters, its champion doesn't blame the lack of a plan. They blame the organization's resistance to change, or colleagues who just don't get it. And what happens is this creates a toxic cycle of perceived brilliance followed by disappointing inaction. Over time, this pattern breeds widespread cynicism. Staff, teachers, employees learn to see new ideas not as exciting opportunities, but as the beginning of another frustrating, dead end initiative. And we all know we don't want any more of those because there are so many. These then become conditioned, these people then become conditioned to ignore the next big thing, knowing it'll likely vanish without a trace. Ultimately, idea voodoo stalls momentum by treating the catalyst as the entire chemical reaction. There's again some more references to my science teaching days. It fixates on the noun, which is the idea, while ignoring the verb, which is the work. True sustainable change requires a culture that values execution as much as, if not more, than ideation. It requires acknowledging that the best idea is worthless without a practical, step-by-step plan to navigate obstacles, persuade stakeholders, and integrate the new reality into existing systems. Escaping idea voodoo means trading the magical thinking for methodical effort. Understanding that change isn't summoned, it is built brick by painstaking brick. So, the message in this episode is don't let idea voodoo cloud your vision as to what is possible. Vision is great, but vision without action doesn't really matter. Embracing a growth mindset can put you in a better position to lead change in your classroom, school, district, or organization. But this is only half the battle. Don't assume that just because you are open to new ideas that everyone else is. This is where the hard and at times frustrating work comes in. The real challenge of change is getting the resistance to embrace and implement your ideas. But that begins with you. As you begin to craft out your ideas, why is this idea valuable? How will it improve the work you're already doing? What will tell you if you are successful? So, what makes a great idea that others will embrace and take some calculated risks? I want you to think about that question. What makes a great idea? And what separates the great ideas from the good or the not so good? So, we all love acronyms. Oh my goodness, we all love acronyms. So I came up with one for ideas. And for ideas, are your ideas innovative, doable, energizing, aligned, sustainable? So, in the word ideas, I is for innovative, D, doable, E, energizing, A, aligned, S, sustainable. This will help you overcome idea voodoo. But let's talk about the I in ideas, innovative. You know, there are so many words associated with innovation. Some popular ones include new, change, transformation, improvement, better, and success. You know, innovation to me in an educational context is creating, implementing, and sustaining transformative ideas that instill awe to improve learning. And the other caveat here is that there's actual evidence to justify that the innovation piece is leading to improvement. You know, fresh ideas are needed that take into account dramatic changes in society, technology, and learner needs. New is not necessarily better. That is why innovative ideas must focus on improving existing culture. Okay? So, after innovative, doable, this goes without saying, everybody. Great ideas consider financial resources, time, mandates. Doable ideas can be associated with lofty goals, but a meticulous effort on articulating the what, why, when, and how must occur to overcome fixed mindsets and an entrenched status quo. Idea voodoo, we get these great ideas and they sound so awesome in theory, but then reality comes crashing down. And it fizzles out because it lacks the doability. So, as you begin to process your ideas, ask yourself, is your idea innovative? Is it doable? Then we get to the E, energizing. If an idea doesn't inspire or motivate someone to embrace different and better, then it might just be a crummy idea. Great ideas should be energizing and create a buzz. When people believe that a change will lead to improved outcomes, embracement is more likely. Again, we have to stop looking for buy-in. We shouldn't have to sell better ways to do things. That is extrinsic. We want people to embrace, to see the value, to do things because they are intrinsically motivated. Initially, the intrinsic piece, people wanting to change, might not be the case. Coming up with great ideas is a start, but the differentiator is how the idea is rolled out. Energizing ideas bring an increased joy to learning and professional practice. They are also presented in ways that motivate and inspire. The next letter in ideas is A, aligned. Great ideas should complement and then enhance what is already in place. This includes curriculum, standards, mandated assessments, and other elements associated with school and district culture. They should also be aligned to research, evidence, professional learning. It is so important to take a critical lens to all ideas to ensure efficacy. A part of Idea Voodoo is, again, we have all these great ideas, but they're all over the place. And people often lack the needed clarity to see how the idea is aligned with the expectations or the core work that they are expected to do. So, part of your role when you come up with an idea is to make sure you align it to sound instructional strategies. You align it to what we know about effective PLCs. You align it to existing or new professional learning, so on and so forth. And finally, the last word and letter in ideas, last word, is sustainable. If an idea fizzles out, then it probably didn't meet any or all of the criteria that I already talked about. Ideas are not sustainable if they're not innovative, doable, energizing, and aligned. Great ideas lead to changes that become embedded in classroom, school, or district culture, as well as professional practice. They withstand the test of time and thus become the new normal way of doing the business of education. So, what I want you to hopefully reflect on as you think about the ideas that you generate or the ideas that you are asked to implement, use my acronym. Ideas. Are they innovative, doable, energizing, aligned, sustainable? Nobody wants more work or just another thing they have to do. We also don't want to look at things through the lens of this too shall pass. So when we think about education, it's not change for the sake of change. It's how do we focus on those small shifts to practice that we do consistently to improve learning and outcomes for our students. So when you have time to reflect, think about your role as a teacher. Think about your role as an administrator. Think about your role as an advocate. And we need to look at ideas. And sometimes the great ideas, the most effective ideas, are the ones that people have already implemented in some way. Don't feel you need to come up with something that is new, because I'll challenge that. I don't know if anything really is new, everybody. How we implement an idea in our context, our culture, might be the new part. But the idea itself, not necessarily. Keep in mind, just because an idea sounds good doesn't mean that it will lead to an improvement. It is time to weed out the bad and so-so ideas while striving to make good ideas great. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Unpacking the Backpack as we kind of dove into the concept of idea voodoo. I will put a past blog post that motivated me for this podcast episode. I think it was back from 2017. Oof, long time ago. And I'll put that in the show notes. And if you're looking for, ideas that are innovative, doable, energizing, aligned, sustainable, I encourage you to check out either Disruptive Thinking in Our Classrooms, Personalize, or Digital Leadership, second edition on Amazon. All the ideas presented in there, not new, but backed by research and evidence. Everybody, as always, thanks for listening, but most importantly, thank you for the great work that you do.